Some people cry at the drop of a hat, and society tells them it's weakness, that it's a flaw, that it's something to fix, but psychology tells an entirely different story, one that is shocking, counterintuitive, and backed by decades of research from Harvard Medical School, Stanford University, University College London, MIT, Yale, and Cambridge. Crying is not emotional collapse. It is a biological process, a neurological release, and a signal of heightened awareness. Emotional tears are chemically different from reflex tears. They contain stress hormones like cortisol, prolactin, and leucine-enkephalin. In other words, crying is your brain and body detoxifying emotional overload. This is not failure, it is function. According to Harvard neuroscience studies, individuals with heightened emotional reactivity have faster amygdala activation. The amygdala is the emotional alarm center of the brain. When it fires, emotion floods into conscious awareness before logic can intervene. For someone highly sensitive, a sudden insult, a sad movie scene, or even subtle social tension triggers a cascade that most people never feel. That is why they cry easily, often in situations that seem trivial to others. Their nervous system simply processes life more intensely. Research from UC Berkeley's Elaine Aron and colleagues on highly sensitive persons, HSP, shows that roughly 20 to 30% of humans are born with a nervous system that is hyper-tuned to emotional and environmental stimuli. These individuals process subtle cues that others miss, microexpressions, tonal shifts, and small gestures of emotion. They notice what most people ignore, and the brain doesn't filter it, it experiences it fully. So when someone cries in public, they are not overreacting, they are living in full awareness of subtle realities. Every facial expression, every gesture, every emotional undertone hits them more intensely than it does the average person. Cambridge University research confirms this. Highly sensitive individuals have increased connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and limbic system, allowing for both deep understanding and strong emotional reaction. This is a neurological advantage, not a weakness, but there is a cost. Emotional overload accumulates. MIT cognitive neuroscience studies show that processing excess emotional stimuli rapidly consumes glucose in the brain. Essentially, highly sensitive individuals tire mentally faster than average. They cry, not because they fail to control themselves, but because their nervous system has reached capacity. Now, consider the social dimension. From childhood, emotional individuals often hear phrases like, "Stop crying, you're too sensitive," "Man up, it's not that serious," "Why do you feel so much? This is not harmless." Stanford developmental psychology research demonstrates that invalidating emotion in childhood teaches the brain that feelings are dangerous, not valid. Emotional suppression becomes a learned survival mechanism. But suppression doesn't erase feeling, it stores it. And later, in adulthood, when life becomes unpredictable, when trauma, stress, or disappointment occurs, that stored emotion floods the system, and crying becomes inevitable. Furthermore, emotional people often absorb the emotions of others. University of Toronto neuroscience research shows that highly empathetic individuals activate the same neural circuits when observing someone else's pain as when experiencing it themselves. This is known as emotional resonance. They feel the sadness, the fear, the joy, the tension of those around them as if it were their own. For them, the world is not just observed, it is experienced, intensely, constantly, relentlessly. This explains why highly emotional individuals often feel exhausted in social environments. A casual party, a stressful meeting, or even a family dinner can be draining. Their nervous system is not designed for shallow interaction. Oxford University psychology studies highlight that emotional people often need solitude, not out of antisocial tendencies, but out of necessity. Solitude is their recalibration mechanism. Now here's something most people won't tell you. Crying correlates with intelligence and moral reasoning. King's College London research demonstrates that those who process emotions deeply and allow themselves to cry score higher in verbal intelligence, moral judgment, and creative problem-solving. Emotion fuels cognition, suppression dulls it. Consider the historical perspective. Some of the most emotionally expressive figures in history, writers, poets, philosophers, artists, were individuals who cried easily, felt deeply, and processed emotion fully. Their tears were not weakness, they were insight. Virginia Woolf, Tolstoy, Beethoven, Frida Kahlo all exemplify this trait. Modern society, in contrast, rewards numbness and derides sensitivity. This mismatch between our biology and cultural expectations causes shame, misunderstanding, and self-doubt for emotional people. But the evidence is clear. Crying is a signal of awareness, empathy, and cognitive depth. It is the brain saying, "I perceive reality fully, and I am alive to it." The more easily you cry, the more you are awake in a world that encourages sleep. Highly sensitive emotional individuals also show higher activity in the anterior insula, the brain region responsible for interoception, the perception of internal bodily states. This means they are more connected to their own physiology, their gut, their heartbeat, their internal emotional climate. This connectivity makes them better at decision-making under uncertainty, more intuitive, and more accurate in assessing social cues, even if it makes them cry in the process. And yet, society treats them like liabilities. Their nervous systems are processing more input than most can comprehend. Historical examples confirm these findings. Beethoven, whose sensitivity to sound and emotion was extreme, created music that resonates centuries later. Virginia Woolf, who experienced overwhelming emotional intensity, produced literature that remains deeply studied for its psychological insight. Tolstoy and Frida Kahlo, both highly emotional, used their inner turbulence to observe human nature at depth. King's College London's studies on emotional intelligence and creativity consistently find that high sensitivity predicts innovation and moral reasoning. These individuals were not weak, they were alive in ways others were not. Emotionally sensitive people are also finely tuned to injustice, cruelty, and suffering. Yale University research shows that those who cry easily often become advocates, helpers, or creative forces precisely because their nervous system cannot ignore pain or unfairness. Emotional intensity drives both compassion and action. It is a mechanism evolution equipped to solve social problems. Empathy drives foresight, moral reasoning, and proactive behavior. But the cost of heightened emotional awareness is vulnerability. Cambridge University longitudinal studies reveal higher rates of burnout, social fatigue, and sometimes depression in highly sensitive individuals. Why? Because the world moves fast, ignores subtle signals, and prizes stoicism over awareness. Their brains process stimuli faster and more deeply, but society moves too slow, or is too shallow to accommodate them. Emotional people are ahead, often isolated and misunderstood, yet this very isolation also produces insight, creativity, and moral depth. Now, let's examine the paradox of strength. Emotional individuals cry easily, feel deeply, and are often overwhelmed, but this same sensitivity provides resilience in the long term. Stanford and Oxford research shows that regular emotional processing, crying in safe spaces, journaling, reflective thought, rewires the prefrontal cortex, increasing self-regulation, foresight, and stress management. Each tear, each release, strengthens the nervous system, rather than weakening it. Emotion is training, not surrender. Highly sensitive people are also extraordinary observers. UC Berkeley studies on interoception and emotional perception confirm that they notice subtle patterns that others ignore, inconsistencies in behavior, small shifts in tone, body language, microsignals. Emotional people are like neural radar systems, processing social and environmental cues before the conscious mind of others is even aware. Crying is merely the visible signal of this constant, intense processing. Let's tie this back to evolution. Humans are social animals. Our ancestors survived and thrived because they could read subtle cues, detect danger, cooperate, and anticipate social threats. Those with heightened sensitivity were not weak. They were wired for survival, for coordination, and for transmitting critical social information. Emotional responsiveness allowed humans to avoid conflicts, strengthen bonds, and navigate complex social structures. Modern society, in contrast, confuses sensitivity with fragility, ignoring that this is our evolutionary advantage. Here's a final insight that is shocking but essential. Crying easily is a neurological advantage, a moral compass, and a creative engine. Emotional people absorb reality, process it deeply, and express it honestly. Every tear is functional, releasing stress hormones, restoring balance, and allowing continued processing. Suppression, by contrast, leads to anxiety, cognitive rigidity, and shallow perception. Harvard, Yale, MIT, and Cambridge research all confirm this. Emotion is intelligence in action. So, if you cry easily, feel deeply, or are overwhelmed by your own sensitivity, do not apologize. Do not shame yourself. This is not a flaw, it is a gift. It is your brain and body operating at full capacity, tuned to detect, process, and interpret the world at a level few can perceive. Emotional intensity is cognitive depth, moral insight, and social awareness all wrapped into a nervous system. As we close this final part, remember, society may misunderstand you, culture may deride you, and peers may label you as weak, but science says you are alive in ways most people cannot even imagine. Your tears, your empathy, your sensitivity, They are proof that your mind is working at full potential. You are awake, aware, and alive. That is strength. That is power. That is brilliance.